The silence in the stone vault was not an absence of sound, but a dense, anticipatory thing, thick enough to swallow the echo of her whimpers before they could form. The only light came from the torches, their flames cowering and flinching as if afraid of what they were compelled to illuminate, casting frantic, trembling shadows that seemed to peel themselves from the walls in retreat. The air tasted of smoke, of cold damp, and of a new, searing metallic scent that coiled in the back of the throat. Around the perimeter, figures stood shrouded in robes the color of a starless midnight, their faces lost in deep hoods, their forms still as gravestones. They did not watch the victim, but the device with the solemn attention of acolytes at a high altar. In the center of this theater of stone and shadow, a young woman was arranged upon her knees. The rough cords that bound her wrists behind her back had bitten deep, her fingers swollen and pale. Another rope, looped under her arms and anchored to a ring in the ceiling, held her torso cruelly upright, denying her the mercy of collapse. The flagstones beneath her were uneven, worn smooth by generations of feet, and slick with a patina of substances she dared not name. She focused on the chill seeping through her thin shift, a mundane sensation to anchor against the surreal horror unfolding around her. Her name was Alara, though in that room, she was no longer a person with a name. She was a lesson waiting to be inscribed. The source of the metallic heat stood to the side an iron cauldron, squat and immense, cradled over a bed of coals that glowed with a malevolent heart. Within it, a substance shifted, molten and heavy, its surface a shimmering, silver, gray skin that broke and reformed with lazy bubbles. An attendant, face wrapped in cloth against the radiating fury, stirred it slowly with a long iron rod, the motion ritualistic, almost liturgical. Then, the executioner approached the cauldron. He was a practical man, his arms thick, his apron of hardened leather stained with old burns. In his hand, he carried not an axe or a blade, but an object of deceptive elegance. It was a wand, perhaps 2 feet long, forged of polished brass that gleamed in the torchlight. Its handle was ribbed for a secure grip, and its end flared into a perforated head, studded with dozens of tiny, meticulously drilled holes. To any parishioner, its shape was immediately, horrifyingly familiar. It was an aspergillum, the sacred instrument used to sprinkle holy water upon the faithful during blessings, to cleanse, to sanctify, to welcome. This was its blasphemous twin. This was its inverse. The executioner dipped the hollow shaft into the cauldron, using a small funnel to guide the sluggish, glowing stream of molten lead into its belly. He capped the end with a thumb-sized plug, lifted it, and turned. The wand dripped a single, heavy bead that hissed into extinction on the stone floor. He walked towards Alara, his steps measured. The air around the wand itself shimmered, a visible aura of distorted heat that made the very sight of him waver, as if he were stepping out of a dream or into a nightmare. Alara's prayer was not to God. God, she felt, had already vacated this chamber. Her prayer was to her own mind, a desperate incantation for fortitude, for the integrity of her own consciousness. She must not faint. To faint was to surrender the last shred of herself to their narrative. She must meet it awake. The Inquisitor, a man with a voice like dry parchment rubbing together, spoke from the shadows. Alara of the Veil, you have been shown the truth, yet you persist in the blindness of your error. You see only the shadow and call it substance. Your soul is occluded. We shall, in mercy, correct your vision. The executioner raised the wand. It was not a dramatic gesture, but a casual one, the practiced motion of a priest beginning a benediction. A flick of the wrist, nimble and precise. What emerged from the perforated head was not a stream, but a cloud, a fine, burning mist of liquid metal, a spray of minuscule, incandescent orbs that hung in the air for a fraction of a second, a constellation of malicious stars, before descending upon her. The first sensation was not pain, but a series of sharp, sudden impacts like hot needles driven deep. Then, the pain ignited. It bloomed across her collarbone, and the slope of her shoulder, a blossoming garden of instantaneous, white, hot agony. Each droplet was a world of suffering unto itself, burrowing through the thin fabric of her shift, fusing it to the skin beneath, where it continued to burn, to cook. A strangled gasp was torn from her lips, the sound sharp and animal. Her body, against the dictates of her will, jerked violently against its bindings, a marionette yanked by a fiery string. The ropes held, creaking, forcing her back into position. The smell reached her then, cutting through the metallic air, the sweet, nauseating, utterly distinctive scent of her own flesh burning. It unlocked a primal terror deeper than any pain. The executioner waited. He did not look at her face, but at the pattern of glistening, cooling lead on her skin, assessing his work. He adjusted his stance slightly. The Inquisitor nodded. A second flick. This spray was higher, aimed at the column of her throat, the line of her jaw. She threw her head back, but the droplets found their mark. One struck the tender flesh just below her ear. The agony was so acute, so focused, it seemed to silence all other sensation for a heartbeat. She tasted blood where she had bitten her own tongue. Her vision, blurred by tears of sheer physiological response, began to tunnel, darkness crowding in from the edges. The light of truth is often blinding to those accustomed to the dark. The Inquisitor intuned, his voice a drone beneath the roaring in her ears. Why must cleanse the organs of your earthly sight so that your spiritual eyes may be opened? She understood then the final target. A final, desperate strength surged through her. She would not give them her eyes. She tried to twist her face away, to bury it against her own shoulder. A hand, cold and impersonal, gripped her hair, yanking her head back into position. She stared up into the darkness of the vaulted ceiling. The third flick of the wrist was deliberate, almost gentle. The molten rain came for her face. She saw it for an instant, a glittering, beautiful, deadly haze rushing towards her. Then it made contact, searing kisses upon her forehead, her cheeks, and then the unbearable, world-ending contact on her eyelids. There was a sizzle, a sound she heard from inside her own skull, a flash of blinding, intolerable white light that had nothing to do with the torches, the violent protest of her optic nerves being seared away. Then, nothing. Not blackness, but a profound and utter void, a nothingness where sight had once been. This time, the scream did not feel like it came from her. It was a force that erupted from the core of her being, raw, unfiltered, a sound of pure ontological rupture. It tore through the chamber, and this time, the stone did not swallow it. It hung in the heated air, a lasting monument to her agony. She is blind no more. The Inquisitor announced, his sentence final. But Alara, in the sudden, silent isolation of her new darkness, found a terrible clarity. The pain was a geography of fire she now inhabited, but it was her geography. They had taken the light, but they had not touched the stubborn, unyielding core of her descent. In the void, her other senses sharpened. She heard the rustle of a robe, the soft, wet sound of the wand being dipped again into the cauldron, the hiss of another droplet falling to the floor. She smelled her burning hair, the lead cooling on her skin, the cold stone beneath her. She felt the heat of the coals on the side of her face, and she understood the full, grotesque theater of it. This was not interrogation. They did not seek secrets she held. This was ritual. Her body was the parchment, the molten lead the ink, and her suffering the liturgy. It was a performance to cement power, a brutal sermon preached to the few witnesses in the room, and by report, to the wider, terrified populace. The message was not for her, but for everyone who might ever think as she did. The flicking continued. The showers of agony fell upon her neck, her arms, her back. Each one a fresh explosion in the dark. She lost count. Time dissolved into a river of pain. Yet, in the heart of that inferno, a small, cold ember of defiance remained alive. They could destroy the vessel, but they could not command the truth within it. Her silence, her refusal to recite their confession even now, was her last, unassailable fortress. Long after her voice had been stripped to a ragged whisper, after her struggles had diminished to faint tremors against the ropes, they finally ceased. The leads cooled on her skin, forming a grotesque, metallic crust. They cut her down. She collapsed, a heap of smoldering pain and ruined flesh, onto the stones. As rough hands dragged her away, towards the dungeon cell that would house her until her final, public execution at the stake, a single phrase formed in her shattered mind, a silent scream that echoed in the cathedral of her skull: I see you. I see you for what you are. And in that moment, the true irony of the holy water wand revealed itself. It was meant to correct blindness, but in its application, it revealed a far deeper blindness in its wielders. A blindness to humanity, to compassion, to the very spirit they claim to serve. It showed that the most profound darkness is not the absence of light, but the deliberate extinguishing of it in another. Alara's physical eyes were ash, but the moral blindness of the men in that room was a chosen, institutionalized, and far more terrible affliction. The device itself would eventually be retired, not out of enlightenment, but because its purpose had been served. The currency of fear it minted entered the bloodstream of society. Its legacy was not in the forgotten instruments of a torture chamber, but in the enduring principle it embodied that authority, when wedded to absolute certainty, can sanctify any cruelty, can twist any symbol of grace into a tool of torment. The holy water wand whispers down the centuries a warning not about the past, but about the perpetual human capacity to build altars upon the suffering of others and to call the resulting conflagration divine.